Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I'm your host, Laurie Hammer, and we are continuing our gut series today. So if you haven't joined us before and you want to catch the other episodes, just go ahead and go back a few episodes and you will be able to listen to all the replays either on anywhere that you're listening to a podcast or on my YouTube channel, Take Back My Brain. So thanks for joining us. We're going to continue this series, and today we're going to talk about what does your gut flora do for you. But before we dive into that, I want to make sure that all of you know about my masterclass that's happening at the end of this month. This is the first one ever in the series in my community for the Calm Mom community. So go ahead and check out the link below to register. We're going to talk about all things gut health. We're going to kind of finalize that series in that masterclass at the end of the month, and you get to ask me any question you want. So that is the exciting piece. Just join my Calm Mom community. You'll have access to that masterclass and all the future masterclasses and all the information I provide that will be exclusive in that Calm Mom community. So check that out, and I'm excited to see all of you in there. So we're going to talk about what does gut flora actually do for us. We were talking about ferments, we're talking about stressors. Let's dive a little bit deeper into just why is this so important? And let's dive a little bit deeper into the soil of our gut. So in 1937, Franklin Roosevelt, our president, said, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." And we can see that happening right now with big ag pharma going on and the state of our food system and all the deficiencies that we have in every mineral and vitamin in this country. So we're planning, our food is deficient, and then we're eating the food, and that makes us deficient. So we have to figure out, how do we fix these deficiencies? So we got to fix our soil, but we also have to fix those deficiencies in our body. And our gut flora is the key to all of that. So we have to learn how to feed that well, take care of it, maintain it so that it can produce the vitamins and minerals and stuff that we need, or help our body to assimilate them if they are not actually producing them. So it's super important. So some researchers say that if we were to take all of our intestines and we were to lay it out, it would be about the size of a tennis court. And that just blows my mind. Like that, all wrapped up, folded, nooked and crannied, all inside of me is the size of a tennis court. That just blows my mind. And in that tennis court, we've talked about this before, is soil. Right? So there's going to be microbes, there's going to be parasites and viruses and different types of bacteria. There's going to be nutrients, there's going to be enzymes, there's going to be all these things in there. And there's going to be a microbiome, a biofilm in there where that microbial world actually lives and moves and breathes and communicates with everything. So the microbials in our toe are communicating with the microbials in our brain, right? So it's a deep network of communication, just like in the soil. Like if you're to think of a forest, the tree microbiome is communicating with the other plant microbiomes or the fungus microbiome or whatever it might be. And so your body is this intricate, beautiful world of microbes. And so without them, we would actually be dead. And I know some people are like, it's really disgusting to think we have all these like bugs in our body, but they're beneficial. We were created to live in harmony, to be in a symbiotic relationship with them. And so it's really important, because one of the best things that they do for us is to protect us from invaders and toxins. So these bugs are supposed to be in us, and these good and beneficial bugs, when they're in balance, they're going to protect us from the bugs that we don't want inside of us. So like in the case of mosquitoes biting us, malaria, right? We don't want that in there. Our microbiome should be able to take care of it so that doesn't bother us. Lyme, we don't want Lyme in our body. Our microbiome should be able to balance all of that out. Most of us have Lyme in our body, but if our microbiome is in balance, that is not going to express itself in our body. So we'd be able to live in symbiosis with that, and we wouldn't have adverse effects in it. Or if we eat something that has like a parasite in it, our microbiome, our body, our stomach acid should be able to eradicate that, and so that we don't get sick. So when things are out of balance, that's when things happen. People's like, I was really healthy, and all of a sudden I end up with Crohn's disease. Well, you didn't just end up with Crohn's disease. Your microbiome had to be in balance in order for that to express itself. And it just something tipped over your toxicity bucket. And that's how your body expressed that next dynamic. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. So one of the best things they do is to help protect us. And I love that we're created that way. And like I said, we have this biofilm, which is like a mucus that just kind of coats everything. And that's where, a lot of action takes place in there. And so then that action actually protects us from chemicals that we ingest or drink. Glyphosate, our microbiome should be strong enough that would be able to protect us from chemicals that would come into our food. A lot of people say, oh, Laura, you talk so much about toxicity, like everybody's toxic. Yes, that is true. So we're all exposed to toxins, but it's when that toxic load gets too high, that's when autoimmune disease expresses itself. Infertility expresses itself. A lot of people don't understand that infertility or even just menstrual issues. So if you have a lot of PMS issues, those types of things, it can be because your microbiome in your uterus and in your gut is really imbalanced. And that's called an estrobolome. So there's a lot of research out there that says, if we balance the microbiome, a lot of these hormone issues are going to shift itself. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself on that. But just so you know, there's a lot of things that are dependent upon this microbiome. So what is the second thing the microbiome is doing for us? It helps us to digest and absorb our food. So the microbiome is great at producing its own enzymes, and those own enzymes will just go around and help us break down our food. And when our other digestive juices break down our food, they work in synergy together. And then the microbiome can send signals saying, hey, a little more calcium needs to be released here, or hey, we need to make more of this enzyme, or whatever it might be. But there's a communication network. And guess what? Your microbiome makes a lot of omegas for your body. It makes a lot of B vitamins. And so a lot of that nutrition comes from within us and not from without us. So if we feed the microbiome everything that it needs, so much gets produced in our own body, and that creates a healthy environment. So we got to make sure we're putting good nutrients in that soil so that we get good plants, we get good growth, we get good health that comes out of us. So it's this beautiful orchestra that goes on. So one of the things that the main thing that actually helps to absorb and break down our food are called enterocytes. So these little enterocytes live like in these little crypts and valleys and hills and stuff that we have all throughout our intestine. It's a beautiful process. And so when those are healthy, that's when we get maximum absorption. That's when we get maximum digestion. But what happens is when we have these stressors, whether it's physical, chemical, or emotional going on in our body, and they're supersede what our body is able to handle, then these enterocytes actually start to die. And they get really sick, and then they don't absorb much. And then we get diseases of malabsorption. And that's going to be, say, osteoporosis. That's a lot of brain chemistry issues going on because we don't have the nutrition to balance those things out. It helps us to break down the proper amount of calcium in our body. And so if we're not able to break down calcium correctly, or we don't have the magnesium and the other vitamins and minerals to balance that out for maximum absorption, then we're going to get calcium deposits in our brain, which is triggered, can actually trigger Alzheimer's or dementia issues, or we get build up in our arteries. Does that make sense? Or we don't have strong teeth or strong bones. So a lot of people who have cavity issues, or they have osteoporosis, I know some people that have kind of flat teeth, that's because they don't have a good gut microbiome. One of the biggest offenders of that would be glyphosate. So the microbiome is actually really damaged by glyphosate, and it doesn't do a very good job of protecting us from it because of the amount of glyphosate that most people are exposed to. So that is a big challenge. But that's why we have to be a little bit more diligent on some things, especially where I live in Iowa. But that's why it's so important to take care of that microbiome, because every nutrient that we absorb into our body has to be broken down into a specific biochemical shape. And guess what? The microbiome does that for us. So it is amazing. And so when that's damaged, that's when we're not absorbing food very well and those types of things. So the third thing that your microbiome does for us is to produce vitamins and hormones. So we're going to get a little bit more into the hormone here. I got a little ahead of myself at the beginning. So your gut flora makes sure that your digestive system is able to feed you properly. Again, vitamins, nutrients. So the microbes are actually very active, and they're going to synthesize those. Again, I talked about the B vitamins, which are vital to just being happy. So if your body's not able to, your microbiome's not producing well because it's sick, that can affect your mood. So again, we're going back to, if you're anxious and depressed, we have to work on the gut. So you know that I always say we start with the brain and we end with the brain, right? So I'm going to help you balance your brain and fix the deficiencies, but then we have to fix the reason why you have the deficiencies. And then we're going to go to the gut and we're going to start working on that microbiome. One of the other thing that the microbiome produces is vitamin K2. Again, this goes back to like calcium absorption, other nutrient absorption. So if we don't have enough K2 to drive calcium, to drive vitamin D into the bones, right? That's when we're going to get those deposits. So it's important to supplement with K2 because most people have a disrupted microbiome. And so you should be, supplementing with K2 as well, but also in the right amounts. And I'll have another episode on that where I'm talking with a gentleman named Tim Koos, who's going to talk about specifically about K2. So, but there's such a very complex conversation going on in the body and the gut, in the gut flora. So we just need to make sure that we're trying to balance that out. But just know that if you have some of these issues, we have to go to the gut, even if you don't have quote unquote gut symptoms. A lot of people look pale. And you know anybody that looks pale? A lot of times that tells us you have anemia. Gut microbiome disrupted is a huge contributor to anemia. So what do? We like take an iron supplement. Well, most of the iron supplements on the market are awful, and they actually damage your microbiome, which is going to create an even deeper issue with your iron deficiency. So heal the gut. Don't take iron supplements. And if you want to have a conversation about that, go ahead and message me on that. But it's so important that we get an iron that is actually broken down by the body, by the microbiome, so that we don't damage things further. What was I going to say else about K2 here is that if the calcium doesn't go into our bones and teeth, that's when we're going to have a lot of tooth decay. I may have already said that. But another place we get a lot of K2 is in fermented foods. So we're talking about ferments in the last episode, and that tells me to tell you again that my fermented recipe cookbook is coming out. So make sure you're checking out the show notes for that, because that is going to be available super soon. So fermented foods, things that are high in K2 would be cheeses, yogurts, some fermented soy products that they use in Asia, like natto, or it's escaping my brain at the moment, so I must need a little bit more microbiome help today. And when we go past that, just know that our microbiome, I'm going to go back to the hormones, produces over 40 hormones. So our microbiome helps our gut produce over 40 hormones. Do you think that might be important as we are trying to navigate, say, menstruation and fertility? It is actually really vital. So it's going to help metabolize those. So many of those are going to be the steroid hormones that are excreted in the body by our bile. And then from the bile, that's going to get carried into the gut. And then what we've discovered is that Clostridium can convert those steroid hormones into androgens, like your male hormones, such as testosterone. And from there, then that produces into estrogen and other steroid hormones. So if you want to look at it, the gut microbiome sometimes is considered maybe even another endocrine hormone or endocrine organ. Isn't that amazing? So your gut flora, your uterine flora, actually influences how your hormones are absorbed, broken down, and expressed. Does that make sense? That always blows my mind. And so when our microbiome is off, one of the biggest things would be like you get estrogen dominant symptoms. Sorry. And one of those things may be like breast tenderness, or you have really bad periods. So you have a lot of clotting, things are heavy, you have a lot of PMS. And so if we don't fix the high estrogen in our body, those high estrogen symptoms, that's when it's can lead to some pretty serious issues, even cancer. And one of the things that I discovered a long time ago when I was researching is that one of the cancers is called melanoma. And if you listen to my very first episode, you will know that I was diagnosed with a really rare and fast growing melanoma. Guess what? I was estrogen dominant. What was one of the things that I had to fix? Cancer wasn't the issue. It was my estrogen dominance that contributed to the reason why I had that malignant melanoma to start with. So shifting the microbiome helps our immune system. Again, these go rogue. Those enterocytes, when they're not being nourished correctly, will go rogue and can turn into cancer. And however your genetics are, may look different. It may be a uterine cancer. It may be the melanoma that I had. It may be breast cancer. But generally, most of that goes back to a hormone imbalance. Where's the hormone imbalance coming from? It's coming from your microbiome. And remember that your microbiome is just not in the gut. It is everywhere in your body. Your eyes have a microbiome. Your uterus has a microbiome. Your skin has a microbiome. Your mouth has a microbiome. And so it's really important that we pay attention and to treat our microbiome as our best friend. Because if we don't treat it as our best friend and we don't nourish it and love on it and talk nice to it, they're not going to be our friends anymore. And they're going to be turn around and become one of our worst enemies. And so that's why we're having this discussion on this, because I don't want anybody to have a microbiome that's angry at you, because having a cancer diagnosis is not fun. But I was the healthiest person I knew, right? I had some gut issues, but I didn't understand the microbiome like I do now. But I would have never dreamed that my microbiome imbalance would have contributed to me developing a type of cancer that was completely preventable. It didn't just happen to me. My body had to be in a state. The soil in my body was not as healthy as I thought it was, clearly, otherwise cancer wouldn't have developed. That's not something that just happens. All right. So let's talk about number 4. And this is one of my favorite things that the microbiome does for us. It is a major producer of neurotransmitters. So here we're going to go back to the brain. And this is what I start with most people is we've got to support the neurotransmitters. So I'm going to fix those deficiencies in the brain temporarily, right? Give that support so that we can fix the gut so that your body actually produces its own appropriate amount of neurotransmitters. So we'll talk about 3 of those today. So the first one would be serotonin. About 95% of serotonin is actually produced in the gut by the microbiome. The second one is dopamine. And dopamine, about 50% of that is actually produced in the gut by the microbiome. So serotonin is like your happy neurotransmitter, like life is good, sunshine is shining on you every single day. That's when you know that your microbiome is healthy and you have enough serotonin. Dopamine would be your motivator. So if you're like, I don't give a flying flip about life and I feel kind of dark and yucky, that's a dopamine issue. Again, 50% of that is in the gut. So we're going to start with the brain, right? Support that so you get immediate or soon to be immediate relief. And then we have to work on the gut. So that's when we make the dietary changes and we start, working on reducing the inflammation in the gut. And then we start working on the balancing of the gut, then detoxing and etc. But those 2 things alone, you don't have enough serotonin and you don't have enough dopamine, you're just not going to feel well in life. And some people are actually born deficient. I had a client in the other day and he's like, since I was little, this is how I felt. He probably wasn't born with a really good microbiome. Did he do anything for that? I mean, did he cause that? Not when he was born, because he didn't have any control over that. And then, so you have that, and then life just happens, right? We just don't know what we don't know. And so how do we take care of our microbiome? Most people don't know how to do that. I didn't realize there was things that I was doing that I wasn't taking care of my microbiome well until I had cancer. I'm like, there's things that I still need to change too. And I'm always learning and always changing and trying to make the health of my family better. And so how many times are we looking for a dopamine hit? Like, what do we do to get a dopamine hit? Like, that feel good, that let's get motivated, let's feel comfy, feel happy, those types of things, when it's coming from our microbiome. So you can do all those things in the world. You can take drugs, you can drink alcohol, you can, drink your coffee, you can do whatever you want to help that motivation. But if you're relying on those things, guess what? It's your microbiome. So when you come to see me, we cut out all of that stuff, even your coffee and your wine and etc. Which, most people don't like me to touch their coffee, but I always do. Because if you're dependent on that for motivation, then we got to figure out why. And that means we have to fix the microbiome, and we can't do that if you're still on those types of things. So something to think about. And then another one would be GABA. So GABA is, you're going to take a deep breath, and you just feel better. It's your really good stress responder. If people are super anxious, a lot of times it's serotonin, but a lot of it is GABA. So you just don't have an appropriate stress response. That's your microbiome. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're able to balance that out. About 70 to 80% of GABA is produced in the gut as well. And so we want to address that so that you actually have a good stress response. So think about it. When you have a stressful event going on in your life, does your gut feel very good? No. And that will just disrupt your microbiome. And then it's hard to get out of that stress cycle. So I know some of you are like, I got all three of those. Yeah, most of us do, right? That's why we have to balance the brain, and then we got to fix the gut, and then we got to detox the stuff. We have to get down to the root issues. And so what I found is that a lot of symptoms, a lot of mental health symptoms disappear when we balance the microbiome. So we support the brain, and people are like, oh, I didn't have as much to worry about as I thought I did, and I can actually make it through life. And then we heal the gut, and then they don't need all the supplements. They're like, oh, it really was a microbiome issue, right? And so then we detox, and then life just gets so much better. So I have a lot of people that have a weight loss issue. They'll do really good. They'll go on a specific type of diet, and then they lose weight. But as soon as they start eating, normal food again, they're going to gain it right back. And that can be so self-defeating, right? You're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this just happened to me. And why is it happening to me, for one? Or maybe you have a binge here and there, but not enough to create the weight gain that you had back, right? And so that's your microbiome. So you can go on all the best diets in the world. Until you fix the microbiome, your body's probably not going to balance out. It's kind of like you can eat all the best food in the world, but if your body can't break it down and absorb it because your microbiome sucks, then you're not going to absorb the really good stuff from your food. So you can eat all the organic foods you want, you can eat all the homegrown food you want, but if you can't digest it, you can't break it down, doesn't really matter now, does it? So that's another thought. So we always think of the microbiome as like our second brain. So there's even a book out there called the second brain. And that's just because our microbes dictates our mood, our thoughts, our behaviors, our circadian rhythm. Did you know your microbiome has its own circadian rhythm? So circadian rhythm, for those of you who don't know, is like you wake up, and then our body cycles into sleep, and that's when our body repairs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, guess what? Your microbiome has the same thing. And so if your microbiome is disrupted and you've got these parasites they kind of live outside the gut during the day, and then at night, they go into the gut because they need to be fed. So they're going to eat up undigested food because you don't digest well. And so you're feeding the bad bugs, you're feeding the bad parasites, and then they're going to wake you up at, say, 3 or 4 in the morning. That's a microbiome issue. So we can try all the melatonin we want, which can help for some people. We're taking all of, the magnesiums, and I use a lot of neurotransmitter support, and that can do a lot of good. But to get to the next level, to really mitigate and fix that circadian rhythm for you, we also got to work on the microbiome, because the microbiome circadian rhythm is probably screwing up your circadian rhythm. So it's really, really important. So as you can see, our body is this amazing community, this amazing ecosystem, and we have to learn to live in symbiosis to it. And honestly, it takes a lot of work. But once you get to a really good place, it's not as hard to maintain as you might think it is. So I'm always constantly working on it. I'm going to be 50 this year, and definitely hormones are shifting. But I'm like, oh, I forgot to say this about hormones. For me personally, this is a personal thing, so just be ready. I was having a lot of breast pain, and I'm like, where's that coming from? Because I hadn't had that for a really long time, and it started coming back. And I'm like, I tried some supplements to balance out hormones. I did hormone testing. All of that came out pretty darn good. I'm like, it's got to be my gut. It's got to be my gut. So I did a pretty intense protocol to shift my microbiome. And guess what? I woke up one day and my breast pain was gone. Just gone. And I didn't really change my food. I was maybe more intentional about some like prebiotic foods, and I was doing a prebiotic supplement, and I was actually shoving probiotics in my body to push out the toxic microbiome that I had in there. Because the normal stuff I was doing, I'm like, this just isn't really working. So I have to shove that microbiome out and create a new diversity. So that was with fasting, that was with intense probiotics, that was some other gut protocols that I did. And guess what? That all went away. And so I didn't need hormones. I didn't need other type of supplementation. I just had to work on my microbiome. So your microbiome is important. There's a lot of things that it does for us. We need to learn to be kind to it. So I hope this was useful to you. Join me in the next episode. We've got 2 more in this gut series before the masterclass. So join me. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe. And most importantly, make sure you share this with someone, because my goal is to reach 1 million people, right? 1 million people. And I'll probably need to expand that because I feel like that's just going to happen really fast. So we've got to get the word out about how to be really calm women and to live the healthiest life that we've been created for. So thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.